Hi, you're in a rock floating in space. Pretty cool, right? Some of it's water. Actually, most of it's water. The good thing is that now you can get from here to there without buying a boat.
How did this happen?
Well, a long time ago, like a really long time ago, the first ideas of flight appeared in legends like the one of Daedalus and Icarus in Greek mythology, where this guy decided that it was a good idea to make some wings to escape a prison, and then his dumb son ignored his warnings about flying too close to the sun, and then his wings melted off and he fell to his death. There's some other interesting stories like the ones of people trying to jump off buildings using wings to fly, but they're kind of dumb. So let's move on to kites. Around the 5th century BC, some two Chinese dudes decided to make some kites. These kites were usually made from silk and bamboo as they were easy materials to get. By 549 AD, paper kites were being used, and it was recorded that that year, a paper kite was used in a rescue mission as a message. Ancient and medieval Chinese sources described kites being used for all sorts of stuff, like measuring distances, testing the wind, and for military communications. It is also believed that man-lifting kites were used in China for military purposes, but were also used as punishment, and it is believed that they would strap prisoners to the kites, push them off a cliff or a tower, and then they would crash land and die. In the 15th century, an Italian man by the name of Leonardo da Vinci was thinking about flying, I guess, and came up with some interesting flying machine designs. And while it seems that he put a lot of effort into them, there's no real evidence to prove that he ever successfully tested them in flight. Let's move on to hot air balloons. The first kind of hot air balloons were sky lanterns, but we don't really gotta talk about them. The first manned hot air balloon was invented by the French Montgolfier brothers and first unveiled on September 19, 1783. Later on, in October of the same year, the balloon made its first manned flight while still tethered to the ground, and later on in November, it made its first free flight. The first military use of a hot air balloon happened in 1794 during the Battle of Fleurus, when the French used a hot air balloon for observation purposes. After the hot air balloon came the airships. These were literally just called dirigible balloons. The first powered and steerable airship to fly was the Giffard dirigible on September 24, 1842, when Henry Giffard flew his steam-powered airship 27 kilometers in around 3 hours. Later on, in 1884, more advancements were made, and the first fully controllable free flight was made in the French Army electric-powered airship La France. It flew for 23 minutes and traveled 8 kilometers with the help of its electric motor. These types of airships were pretty fragile, though, and would not last long. The construction of the first Zeppelin began in 1899, and it made its first flight on the 2nd of July 1900, but only lasted 18 minutes as a result of a mechanical issue. In later flights, it beat the speed of the La France airship by 3 meters per second, and the first airline was founded in 1909 in Germany by the name of DLAG, or Deutsche Luftschiffahrtsaktiengesellschaft.
Deutsche Luftschifffahrtsaktiengesellschaft.
It flew mostly within Germany, but later expanded with routes to North and South America. Unfortunately, DLAG did not last long and ceased operations in 1935. But now, we're finally getting onto planes. While there were some people claiming to have done the first sustained, controlled, powered, heavier-than-air manned flight, the one most famous and the one recognized by the Smithsonian Institution and the FAI is the flight of the Wright brothers that happened on the 17th of December 1903 at Kill Devil Hills, North Carolina, and their plane, the Wright Flyer. This plane had a motor to power its propellers to generate thrust, and wingtips, rudders, and elevators to be able to fully control the plane. It was truly a big innovation. With new technology comes the military, because they need everything possible to be able to kill people better. The first country to use planes for military purposes was Italy. Their planes made reconnaissance, bombing, and artillery correction flights in Libya during the Italian-Turkish War. This war also saw Ottoman soldiers shoot down a warplane for the first time in history. The first war to see major use of airplanes in offensive, defensive, and reconnaissance capabilities was World War I. The Allies and Central Powers both used airplanes and airships extensively. Around 20 years later, it seemed like we were bored of not killing each other, and World War II came along. World War II saw a great increase in the pace of development and production, not only of aircraft, but also the associated flight-based weapon delivery systems. Air combat tactics and doctrines started being rapidly developed. Large-scale strategic bombing campaigns were launched, fighter escorts introduced, and more flexible aircraft and weapons allowed precise attacks on small targets with dive bombers, fighter bombers, and ground attack aircraft. New technologies like radar also allowed for more coordinated and controlled deployment of air defense. The first jet aircraft to fly was the Heinkel HE 178, developed by the Germans. It was first flown by Erich Wurtz in 1939, and was followed by the world's first operational jet fighter, the Messerschmitt Me-262, in July 1942, and the world's first jet-powered bomber, the Arado R-234, in June 1943. Not only airplanes, but also helicopters saw a rapid development in the Second World War. Following World War II, commercial aviation expanded quickly, primarily relying on former military aircraft to carry passengers and cargo. There was an excess of large bombers, such as the B-29 and Avro Lancaster, which were easily converted for commercial use. The DC-3 played a key role, enabling longer and more efficient flights. The British de Havilland Comet became the first commercial jet airliner and was introduced into scheduled service by 1952. The aircraft was a breakthrough in technical achievements, but had several intense failures. The square design of the windows caused stress cracks from metal fatigue, caused by cycles of cabin pressurization and depressurization. This eventually led to severe structural failures in the fuel area. On September 15, 1956, the USSR's airline Aeroflot became the first to offer continuous regular jet services using the Tupolev Tu-104. Soon after, the Boeing 707 and DC-8 also set new standards in comfort, safety, and passenger experience. This was the beginning of the jet age, the introduction of large-scale commercial air travel. Oh yeah, and in October 1947, Chuck Yeager became the first person to fly faster than the speed of sound when he piloted the rocket-powered Bell X-1 past the sound barrier. In 1961, Yuri Gagarin became the first human in space when he completed a single orbit around the Earth in 108 minutes aboard Vostok 1. Following this, the United States sent Alan Shepard on a suborbital flight using a Mercury program capsule. In 1963, Canada became the third nation to enter space with the launch of its satellite, Alouette 1. The space race culminated in the landing on the moon in 1969. In 1967, the 737-100 made its maiden flight and initiated one of the most successful airliner families. In 1969, there was the introduction of the Boeing 747, and the Concorde supersonic airliner had its maiden flight. The Boeing 747 was the largest commercial passenger aircraft ever to fly at the time, but was then replaced by the Airbus A380, capable of transporting 853 passengers. Aeroflot started flying the Tupolev Tu-144, the first supersonic passenger plane, in 1975. The next year, British Airways and Air France began supersonic flights over the Atlantic with the Concorde. In 1979, the Gossamer Albatross achieved the status of the first human-powered aircraft to fly over the English Channel, which had been a dream for centuries. The last quarter of the 20th century saw a change of emphasis. No longer was revolutionary progress made in flight speeds, distances, and materials technology. This part of the century instead saw the spreading of the digital revolution, both in flight avionics and aircraft design and manufacturing techniques. In 1986, Dick Rutan and Jana Yeager flew the Rutan Voyager around the world unrefueled and without landing. In 1987, the A320 made its maiden flight and initiated the most successful aircraft family in history. In 1999, Bertrand Piccard became the first person to circle the Earth in a balloon. 21st century aviation has seen increasing interest in fuel savings and fuel diversification, as well as low-cost airlines and facilities. There appears to be a newfound interest in returning to the supersonic era, after diminishing demand in the turn of the 20th century made flights unprofitable, as well as the final commercial stoppage of the Concorde due to the reduced demand following a fatal accident and rising costs. At the beginning of the 21st century, digital technology allowed subsonic military aviation to begin eliminating the pilot in favor of remotely operated or completely autonomous UAVs. In April 2001, the unmanned aircraft Global Hawk flew from Edwards Air Force Base in the U.S. to Australia, non-stop and unrefueled. This is the longest point-to-point flight ever made by a UAV, and it took 23 hours and 20 minutes. UAVs are now an established feature of modern warfare, carrying out pinpoint attacks under the control of a remote operator. In 2015, Andrei Borshek and Bernard Piccard flew a record distance of 7,211 kilometers from Nagoya, Japan to Honolulu, Hawaii, in a solar-powered plane, the Solar Impulse 2. The flight took nearly 5 days. During the nights, the aircraft used its batteries and the potential energy gained during the day. The 737 MAX made its first flight in January of 2016. On the 14th of July 2019, Frenchman Frankie Zapata attracted worldwide attention when he participated at the Bastille Day military parade, riding his invention, a jet-powered flyboard air. He subsequently succeeded in crossing the English Channel on his device on August 4th, 2019. The 24th of July, 2019 was the busiest day in aviation. Flight Radar 24 recorded a total of over 225,000 flights that day. It included helicopters, private jets, gliders, sightseeing flights, as well as personal aircraft. On June 10th, 2020, the Pipistrel Velis Electro became the first electric airplane to secure a type certificate from EASA. In the 21st century, the first fifth-generation military fighters were produced, starting with the F-22 Raptor. After 2 fatal accidents, the 737 MAX was grounded worldwide. These accidents were linked to the MCAS system. All 737 MAX aircraft remained grounded until November 2021. The COVID-19 pandemic had a significant impact on the aviation industry due to the resulting travel restrictions, as well as a slump in demand among travelers. Today, these numbers have recovered, and air travel has returned to its pre-pandemic levels. As aviation continues to evolve, it'll be interesting to see what new planes and technologies come over the coming years. I want to thank you all for watching. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. It really helps me out and helps this video reach more people.